Sex has consequences, good, beautiful consequences, but they could be bad consequences if that's not the person that you're planning on spending the rest of your life with. So in the moment, it's so easy and carefree and, la la la, to be like, oh, this is what feels good. This is what I want. I have this connection. I have this chemistry. But there are consequences that come from that. And if you're not sure, then I don't think you should be doing that. So I personally know a lot of Mormons, actually, and I know they don't like to be called Mormons. We're going to talk about that. But I do know a lot of people that are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so today I'm going to do something that's very unlike my channel. Like, I don't think I've ever done anything like this before on my channel. If you saw my video, a few videos a day called Okay, So I've Changed, I did address the fact that I'm going to be trying kind of a bunch of different content moving forward. Before we hop right in, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, you could subscribe to it and hit the thumbs up if you like this video and you want to see more reaction videos. I've been kind of vibing the whole reaction thing lately. Let me know your thoughts. And I also have all of my social media linked: Instagram, TikTok now, and you can find all of that down below. Also, something new that I've never tried, a microphone like this. This microphone I usually wear like connected to my shirt, and this might prove to be a mistake holding my microphone. It's either going to be better sound or it's going to be way worse sound. There's also a chance that this video won't see the light of day, but I felt like I just wanted to make it because A, I actually watched all of the episodes and I just felt like it had to be for something. And B, I saw my friend Cynthia make a commentary reaction video to this series. And when I watched hers, I really liked it. I found it interesting. And so she kind of gave me the inspiration to make a reaction video of my own. So that is what I am here today to do. I'm here today to talk to you about the secret lives of Mormon wives. So a few more disclaimers and just kind of like info I have to say that's kind of important leading to this video that is going to give you a little bit of insight into my insight and commentary on this TV show. First off, I want to say, like I said, a disclaimer. I don't watch much reality TV. I'm not someone that like never has ever watched reality TV. I have watched reality TV over the course of my life, but I am definitely not a regular consumer of reality TV. Most of my time, if you watch my channel, you already know this, is spent like, honestly, my favorite type of content is like educational content. I really like documentaries. I like podcasts. I like lectures. I like sermons. I like audiobooks. That just tends to be what I gravitate towards. Though that being said, I actually do watch commentary as well, but it's not always commentary on stuff like this, though I did watch a couple of videos of commentary on this show. And honestly, it got to the point where like I felt like this show was all anyone was talking about in like on the internet. I saw so many people talking about it. And then on top of that, like I mentioned, I actually know a lot of members of the church, like in my real life, or I have known a lot of members of the church. I have worked with a lot of members of the church. And I also have experience not only in influencer culture, as we all know, but I also have experience a little bit in reality TV show culture, if that's a thing. Not really. I've never actually been on a reality show, but I have had experience in it in the sense that like I've known people that have been producers on major reality TV shows. I also have been a part of a series that was pitched to potentially be picked up that thank God did not get picked up. And actually, even if it did get picked up, I wasn't going to be a part of it because in the interview, one of the questions that they asked was essentially, would I be comfortable throwing my fellow influencer friends under the bus in the show and basically like creating drama? So that is something going into this commentary. I want to say that first off, I probably won't be addressing too many specifics from the show, although who knows, we'll see. I'm kind of doing like a free flow thought process type commentary in here, but I don't know that I'll be getting that specific. But if I do comment on any of the situations or the girls, I want to say that it is under the guise of me being fully aware that we are commenting on TV. Like literally, I think everybody knows that reality TV is not reality, but some of the commentary that I watched, I kind of found myself wondering, like, do these people know this? I'm essentially commenting on something that was put up for entertainment. There's a very good chance that a lot of these girls aren't even the way that they seem, or the situations weren't even really unfolding in the way that they were presented as unfolding in the show. Stuff is very much constructed in reality TV. There are storylines that are pitched, things that are created from start to finish. And so I just want to say that. I mean, no offense to any of these girls if they watch this video. I doubt they'll watch it because everybody and their mother is doing a commentary. So what are the chances they're going to see mine? But if they do, if you're watching, I mean nothing against any of you, mostly because I am fully aware that reality TV is not real, like ever. One thing that I want to say is I noticed that when the show was first starting to roll out, there were a lot of members of the LDS church, and I may use the word Mormon. I don't mean it as a slam. I just that is the language that is used a lot, but I'm going to try to say member. There are a lot of members of the church that came out saying like, hey, this does not represent our church. These girls do not represent us as members of the church. And I have to say, after watching the show and watching other people's commentary, like I said, I totally agree. I have known so many Mormons, especially over the last 8+ years, and none of them have been anything like the way that the girls in the show were presented. All of the members that I have known have actually been very conservative. So I'm hopping back in here to shout out the very first sponsor of today's video, and that is Bioptimizers with their Bioptimizers Magnesium Breakthrough. And I've talked about this in the last few videos that I've posted. Shout out to you, Bioptimizers. Their magnesium is literally incredible. I've been taking this product for about the last year and a half. What makes their product so awesome, honestly, I think that they have one of the best, if not the best, magnesiums on the market. And the reason for that is because Magnesium Breakthrough actually contains 7 different types of magnesium. Now you might be like, why do I need 7 different types of magnesium, Nikki? Well, the reason why you need 7 different types of magnesium is because a lot of people, when they start looking into magnesium, because magnesium is actually kind of hard to get in your diet and it's a very helpful nutrient. And so when people start looking into it, they might just land on like a scrandum magnesium, or they'll start realizing that there are lots of different kinds of magnesiums because different magnesiums do different things in the body. So some magnesium helps with like restless leg syndrome or headaches or digestion or sleep or anxiety. And the list honestly goes on. But the cool thing is when you are taking one pill like Magnesium Breakthrough that contains 7 different types of the highest quality magnesiums, you are upping the likelihood of your body's ability to be able to absorb and utilize the different magnesium types for different things within your body. So you're really going to be getting the most benefits from magnesium by taking one that has these different types. So when I was pregnant with Logan, I've mentioned this before, I struggled with like severe restless leg syndrome. And at that time, I was only doing magnesium on the bottom of my feet, and I was also taking Epsom salt baths like crazy. But apparently, it was not enough magnesium or not the right type of magnesium, because this last pregnancy with Lizzie, as long as I kept my magnesium stores up, which really meant for me at least 1 magnesium pill a day, I had 0 restless leg syndrome. And sometimes I would skip a day or 2 here or there. And a lot of times when I would skip a couple of days, I would start to notice that my restless leg syndrome was coming back. And I would just get up, go take a pill, and within minutes, it was gone. It was literally miraculous. I can't recommend this stuff enough. And the other cool thing is magnesium is really known for helping you sleep peacefully and sleep deeply. And this stuff definitely does that, but it's not a sleeping pill. It's really more just like it kind of calms you out, zens you out, kind of kicks out that fight or flight vibe. So I've had a couple of days where I've woken up a little bit high strung, a little on edge, whether I'm just having a little anxiety or I didn't get as much sleep the night before because Lizzie was up more, but I have to get up and get moving. I've taken a magnesium pill at the top of the day, and I am astonished as to how much it just helps take the edge off, like I said, with that fight or flight feeling. So for real, I love this stuff. So if you use my code NikkiP10, you will get 10% off of your purchase. By the way, you can use my code as many times as you want, but if you are looking at subscribing to Magnesium Breakthrough, obviously you do what makes sense, but I'm just letting you know I don't actually receive commission for that every month. So if you're going out of your way to support me, which anytime you shop through the brands that I partner with, it's always support. I'm just letting you into the inside. I don't receive commission off of that. And actually, more importantly than that, I don't think that the discount code applies to subscriptions. So you are better off if you want to utilize my code, just kind of replacing your order every month, because I just truly think that once you start taking this magnesium, you're going to become hooked like I am. Thank you, Bioptimizers, for sponsoring this video. And thank you to all of you, as always, that support me and shop through the brands that I love. Even the progressive Mormons that I have known have been much more conservative on the surface than the way that the girls in the show were presented. They don't use the language, like the expletives that the girls use. They don't talk about a lot of the topics that were talked about in the show. They're just much more conservative. The way that they dress, it's pretty obvious that so many of them that I have known do in fact wear their garments, which is part of their faith. It's called the endowment, how they basically become like accepted into the temple. It's part of the whole process. By the way, I'm not going to go off too much onto that, but I have to say as well, because I have known so many members of the church over the last like 8+ years, I have actually low-key developed like an obsession. I am so fascinated by the faith because there is so much to it. And it's a relatively newer faith when you compare it to other Christian denominations, even Protestantism, but especially like Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy. But within, people who claim to follow Christ, it is like a new faith, but it's not like brand spanking new, but we're talking like the last couple hundred years, 200 and something years. I don't remember exactly. Early 1800s is when it came to be, but there is so much detail within the faith. There is so much to it, not only in regards to the laws, the things that they are supposed to follow in order to be in good standing and have a temple recommend, which allows them to get into the temple. They get their garments, they do all of their ceremonies there, including being sealed, which is kind of like in their eyes getting married for not only all of time, but all of eternity. There's a lot to it. So I'm very fascinated by the faith in general. So even though obviously, I am not a member of the LDS Church, I just find it interesting. And that is the other reason that I wanted to comment on this. So yeah, I have to agree with all of the members out there who have said that these girls don't represent them in their church. Now, I have watched ex-Mormons or very liberal progressive members talk about this show as well. And they have claimed that the girls actually do represent a lot of the culture. So maybe not face value are they living out some of these values that a lot of members find important, but that a lot of the cultural stuff has in fact made itself shown in the show. Now, I will say there's a crossover here, I think personally, between church culture and Utah culture. And they kind of tend to overlap, in the show, they spend a lot of time at the soda shop drinking sodas, which is so wild to me on a separate note, because I personally am of the camp that something like coffee or tea is going to be much healthier for you than soda. But this is also part of their faith. They have essentially a health code book called the Word of Wisdom that has basically told them not to drink coffee or tea. A lot of people think it's caffeine, and maybe some members even translate it that way. As far as I can tell, the way that I see it, it's coffee and tea, not caffeine. And that is why so many soda shops exist. And here in Idaho, there's a very large presence of the LDS Church as well. So we have quite a few soda shops around town as well. And so they are drinking soda a lot in the show. In the show, you do see a baby blessing happen at someone's house. And one thing that is talked about a lot, like a handful of the girls in the show are actually divorced, and some of them are divorced and remarried. And they talk about that basically being in direct conflict with the church. And that is one of the biggest things that I noticed is none of the members that I've met over my years were divorced. All of them that I've known have all either been married for a long period of time, they're still married. I'm actually trying to think through the Rolodex of members that I know, and I actually don't know any divorced members. I'm positive they get divorced. People get divorced. Stuff happens. Marriage doesn't always last. Now, being a believer, I do think that divorce, breaks God's heart. That's something that is actually kind of celebrated or talked about in a much lighter-hearted way on the show at moments, about divorce, being no big deal. And that's what's great about life. You can just start over. And I personally think that divorce is so much heavier than that. So one of the girls in the show, she's kind of like one of the main characters. I mean, they're all kind of main characters to a degree, but one of the main characters on the show is this adorable girl named Taylor Frankie Paul. She is so cute and she's so likable, just very chill and laid back, which is ironic as I'm describing her as that, because she was actually arrested for domestic violence a while ago, I guess. I have not followed any of these girls prior to this show. So I'm not gonna, I can't act like I know the history of like what's gone on here. I pretty much just know what the show has presented me or what other commentators I've heard have talked about. But Taylor Frankie Paul, regardless of her domestic violence arrest, has a very chill, likable vibe. But a theme that exists for her throughout the show is her kind of fear of marriage. She is divorced on the show and she's dating in her life. I shouldn't say on the show. I'm inclined to say on the show because everything in reality TV just automatically feels to me like I'm being duped. Like it's not real. So I tend to say that. But she is divorced and she is pregnant with her boyfriend's baby. And a topic that comes up quite a bit on the show, kind of like the main conflict between her and her boyfriend, is the fact that her boyfriend wants to get married and she doesn't. And not only does her boyfriend just want to get married, but her parents want her to get married. And that's just kind of, the general pressure that she's feeling is the pressure to get married. And I have to say, watching her process through all of this on the show, it's obviously something that's weighing really heavy on her, something that's caused her a lot of pain. They talk a lot about distrust in each other because each of them have had previous sexual partners. And even because of the way that their relationship started in the very beginning, they basically hooked up right away and were sleeping together. And then there was also some potential other like dating hookup relationships happening at the same time. And kind of the thought that kept passing through my mind when I was watching this was like, man, this is why God created an order in relationships. There is something I believe that is sold in culture and maybe through feminism in general, this idea that and I used to get this a lot, especially before I got married, because when Dan and I got married, we had not slept with anyone else. We are each other's only intimate partners in that sense. And a lot of people would make comments, there's the famous one of like, how do you know you're going to like the car if you don't test drive it? And first off, I think it's very weird to compare people to cars. We are people. We have souls. We get in relationships. Cars are inanimate objects. They are pieces of machinery. It's not the same thing. It's like comparing not even apples to oranges, because at least those are both fruit, but it's just a really bad comparison in my opinion. But I just kept thinking like, there are things that are pushed or taught or encouraged within faith communities. And one of those is saving sex for marriage, for that person that you're going to commit your life to. And I think a lot of times culture or feminism, whatever, has interpreted that to be oppressive, has interpreted that to be like, what about the rest of your life? Like, how do you know it's going to be good sex? How do you know that they're going to be the only person you're ever going to want to be with in that way for the rest of your life? I think there is something to be said in people in general that like the farther you push something, oftentimes like the farther you want to take it. So going all the way to sex, I don't think is necessary to know if you have chemistry with someone. You can find out in other ways if you have chemistry. But I saw a post the other day that was talking about basically how women want romance, women want electricity, they want that commitment. But then we've essentially taken it away in culture where we are open to sleeping with people that we are not committed to for life, being with them in that way. In this case, creating a baby, creating a new life without that commitment. But then we still want that reassurance of like, will they stick around? Will they be there with me? We want that electricity. We want that romance. But when you look at old-timey movies like Pride and Prejudice, everybody always talks about that infamous scene where Mr. Darcy's hand crosses, what's her name, Elizabeth's hand. And it's like, electricity, and he like squeezes his hand. A big part of the reason that existed, and this is probably obvious, but was because there wasn't anything further happening in the relationship at that point. They kept the activities that they were doing more clamped down, more reserved for marriage. I'm not saying that people in the past didn't sleep with each other outside of marriage, but I'm saying there was more of a cultural expectation. And in that scenario, that was what was happening. Because they hadn't experienced more, it kept the electricity, it kept it more sacred. And for me, what I thought when I was watching that was, I don't know how someone can hook up in that degree. They can sleep with each other. They can tell their partner to go ahead and date whoever they want because we aren't committed, and not ultimately have pain and severe trust issues later. I think, and this was kind of the point I was going to get to earlier, I think that there are things within the Christian faith that can be interpreted as being oppressive, that in my opinion, as someone who believes in these tenets, who believes in the Bible, that I think that those morals are laid out for our own good, not to oppress us, not to squash us down and take our joy away, but to ultimately protect us and cultivate deeper relationships that are hopefully less fraught with a certain kind of pain. And that's just kind of what I kept thinking when I was watching the way that they portrayed their relationship in the show. I just kept thinking, man, like these are things that essentially could have been avoided. Now, I don't fully mean that because they created a life, and I believe that all life is ordained by God. And so it's beautiful that they have this beautiful baby. But doing things within that like protected order and creating a commitment, a lifelong commitment to someone, and going carefully into marriage, making sure that that other person has similar morals as you, upholds similar values as you, like values the same things as you, I think is an important precursor to hopefully protecting yourself and your future children. Because that's the thing, not only, and this is obvious, right? Not only does divorce impact the parents, like you guys are the ones getting divorced, but it impacts obviously your children. And I think that it impacts actually your whole community. It ripples out from there. Torn relationships, when they have initially started from a place of vowing to be together for the rest of your lives, I believe impacts everyone. Now, like I said, stuff happens. So this is not me shaming anyone, for real. But this is just me kind of thinking out loud about the sanctity of marriage and why I think that exists and why I think it's important. And the bottom line reason why I think it is important, even though we could go off onto a whole bunch of other things like physical, potential health issues. But the bottom line why I think it's important is because I truly do believe that sex does something that intertwines two people and really, truly is part of the process of two becoming one. Now, granted, having children has kind of elaborated that thought further for me, because this idea of two becoming one, I think has become even more real now that we've created children. It's like, oh my gosh, literally two became one. But I think the same thing in sex too. I don't want to get too graphic about the interchanging of fluids, but I think that that does something between people. And so to have that exchange under such light, oh, whatever, we're just having fun, I don't really believe that. I think that that's just the very first top layer of like kind of like a coat around it, a coat of armor. Like, oh yes, it's just fun. It's just light. It's just free. We're just having a good time. But then when you peel those layers off and you get deeper, I don't think that it's really possible to have it be light and fluffy and fun. I think that sex is bonding. I think it's intimate. And I think that when it's done under the guise of being light and fluffy and fun, I think it almost always inevitably leads to pain, to jealousy, and to regret. So I felt for Taylor in the show, because I can only imagine feeling distrusting again, going into another marriage, not wanting that same thing to happen again, not wanting the pain of divorce to rip you apart. But at the same time, my brain just kept going, but you've already made a child. And she said a few times in the show, like, I don't want to get married just because I have a kid. And I can kind of understand that. And then in the same breath, though, I'm thinking, but you're never going to get away from this person, ever. He's there for the rest of your life. So when we talk about layers and levels of pain, and just, layers is a good way to put it. One of the layers is this person is never leaving. And it would be much more simple, even though simple feels like the wrong word, to work through the relationship and to develop the relationship and grow closer together, not only for the sake of the child, quote unquote, but also for you, because you've already created a very deep, special, and intimate bond with that person. Sex has consequences, good, beautiful consequences, but they could be bad consequences if that's not the person that you're planning on spending the rest of your life with. So in the moment, it's so easy and carefree and, la la la, to be like, oh, this is what feels good. This is what I want. I have this connection. I have this chemistry, but there are consequences that come from that. And if you're not sure, then I don't think you should be doing that. That's honestly what it is for me. I don't think that you should be engaging in such a deep, intimate act with someone when you're not sure that that's someone, as sure as you can be, that you would like to spend the rest of your life with, because the consequences are far too profound. Okay, I'm back with the second sponsor of the video. Apparently, stripes are my favorite pattern. And that's not just because this bag is striped and my shirt is striped, though I have realized lately I have an obscene amount of striped clothing, as does my son and probably will my daughter. Anyways, shout out to the second sponsor, Masa Tortilla Chips. If you haven't heard of Masa, these are the best tortilla chips ever. I'm not kidding. Part of what makes them amazing, particularly for nachos, literally they're the best nacho making chips ever. Besides the fact that there are no yucky seed oils in these chips, they are literally just corn, organic grass-fed beef tallow, and salt. Or in this case, these are actually the churro flavor. So there is also cinnamon in here, royal cinnamon, and some organic powdered sugar. But the reason that these are the best nacho chips is because they don't get flimsy with like toppings on them. They stay crispy. Or I love crumbling up their tortilla chips to put it in my chili, because even if you have like a big bowl of chili, by the time you get to the bottom, the chips have still stayed crunchy. So you still get that crunch in all of your bites. It's absolutely amazing. I can't recommend their chips enough. So if you're like me and you do much better off of seed oils and it keeps the inflammation and pain down in your body, and you're looking for good quality corn tortilla chips, I can't recommend these enough. You will not find like crispy tortillas at the store or tortilla chips like this at the store. They just aren't there. So I will have the link down below. If you use my code Nikki Philippi, you will receive 20% off of your order. Thank you, Masa, for sponsoring this video, and happy nacho making, guys. So something else that I wanted to talk about on the show is just the friendships. I obviously have experience of being friends with other content creators. I have had a lot of genuine friendships over the years, people that I genuinely admire and I genuinely like. Now, that can get fuzzy, and this is what I noticed on the show as well, because when you are someone that loves to create content, you love to make things, and you find other women, other people that like to create content, sometimes a friendship can be forged just based on that. You're both into camera work, you're both into storytelling, you're both into editing, you're both into whatever, beauty, music, whatever it is. And so sometimes those friendships can kind of just be forged through that. And you can, in fact, find out over time, like, oh, just kidding. Like, a friend means something more to me than just the fact that we have content creation in common. And that can sound kind of obvious or maybe kind of shallow, but also not so much. I mean, people become friends with people in their band group, like at band at school or whatever, in theater group at school, on their soccer team. And so I kind of mean the same thing for all of it. Becoming friends just based on those interests, in my opinion, is not necessarily enough to create a deep friendship. But at the same time, I see why people become friends that way, because I have made so many friends just through the different things that I'm passionate about. And, there was kind of this struggle on the show between Whitney and the other girls, really between all of them at different points, wondering and asking, like, are we really friends? Or are we just friends for social media? And like, what does being a friend even mean? And it really is a good question. And I found myself in that position a few times with different content creator friends over the years, where I would wonder, what is it that makes us friends? Are we really friends? Like, would you really be there for me? Do we even share the same values? Or are we all just interested in, like I said, camera work, editing, content creation, storytelling, beauty, music, acting, whatever? And the bottom line is, when life gets tough, and particularly in this case on the show, like all of these women are moms, once you become a parent, especially in my opinion, things get really real, right? Stuff gets heightened, and the hardships of life become a little more glaring. And you do start to look at these friends that you have kind of these more shallow things in common with, and you start to wonder, like, are we really friends? Would you really be there for me? I had an experience. I'm not going to tell details, but you guys know, if you've been watching my channel for a long time, I've been on YouTube now for 14 years, and you have probably seen me run in different crowds, different friend groups, different content creator groups. And I had one content creator friend a long time ago, and I'm going to try to leave the details out so that no one can do any sleuthing and guess, because I'm not trying to reveal anything. But basically, there was something really bad that had happened to a friend behind her back, and she did not know about it. And everybody else in the group knew about it. And I remember when I found out, I looked at the group and I'm like, aren't you guys going to tell them? Aren't you going to tell her? And all of them were like, oh no, I'm too scared to tell her. And I was like, dude, that's so messed up. I would so want to know if that was happening to me. And so I went to that friend and I told them what was happening. And that kind of cost the friendship. That blew up in my face in a way that I never expected. But looking back, it made so much sense, because we did not share the same values. And it really was a situation where it was like, man, legitimately, I would actually consider people to not be my friend if they kept that thing from me, because it was so profound, and they knew I was right. It impacted them in a very large way, and they ultimately took action on the thing that I had told them because they knew I was right. But it still ended the friendship because, I mean, honestly, I'm not even sure why. But what really became apparent in that situation was what I just said, like, oh, we don't have the same values. And so we like a lot of the same things, but that doesn't mean that we can be tight friends. And, back then I didn't have kids. I know that I said that kids really make things really real, but I was married, and I was like one of the only people in the group that was married. And that's part of it too, is like, I mean, you guys know, like, I take my marriage seriously. I'm 16 years deep into marriage, almost 17. And that's how it's always been. I had made the mistake of assuming that everybody else took their relationships as seriously as I took mine. But beyond that, like I said, it became apparent we did not share the same values. We did not share the same morals, and, different strokes for different folks. But I think it's evident on the show, the way that they're portraying it, that just because you have kind of these shallow things in common doesn't mean you're going to be tight. Now, what can make it kind of tricky, and here's the thing, not every friendship has to be super deep. I remember working with a mentor in high school, and the woman told me, like, different friends serve different purposes. Different people bring different things to the table. And I will say something interesting about influencer culture, although I think this can be applied to every single field, whether you're a soccer player or you're on the math team or whatever. But not everybody knows what it's like to be an influencer. Not everybody knows what it's like to have, and I'm using the word influencer because that's the most common word, but my favorite word is content creator. Not everybody knows what that's like, to have people commenting on you, making stuff up about you, praising you, just all of the things that come with that, stopping you when you're out in public. Like, not everybody knows what that feels like. So there is, to some degree, a certain level of bonding that can take place in the influencer sphere when you become friends with other influencers, because you're like, yo, you know what this is like. I know what this is like. We're in it together. But like I said, at the same time, especially from the background that I came from, LA influencer culture in particular, I just think it's important to become friends, to put in time with friends who share similar values. Just like picking a marriage partner, someone to marry, I think that it's going to make it much easier to work through sticky relationship dynamics when you know that you have some similar core traits. Now, no one is going to be exactly the same. I was actually just having this conversation with, randomly, the friend that I mentioned in my last video, who I'm planning on bringing on my podcast soon when I relaunch it, the one who works in the hospital and has a master's degree and doesn't vax her kids. And we were talking about how, like, even when you do meet people who have a lot of shared values, nobody is the same, just like thumbprints, fingerprints, right? There is nobody that's exactly the same. So you don't want to be like so uptight that you can't navigate relationships with people and admire and like people for who they are. But at the same time, there does come a point where it's like, okay, do we have anything else in common than the fact that we're on the soccer team together? I don't know why I keep using that example, or that we're both influencers or whatever. So that was a big thing on the show. And I say that to say, the way that they presented these girls in the show led me to sit there and be like, yo, I wouldn't want to be in this friend group. Like, there were some horrible things that took place besides the way that they fought, the way that they talked to each other very often. On top of that, it was like the situations that would happen, which who knows how much of this, once again, was prompted by the producers, the good old producers. But situations like, I have a truth box where we're going to ask these truthful questions. And they were like horrible questions where I'm just like, man, leave it to some catty girls to ask these questions. Like, who does this? Things like, Taylor, or what was it? Whitney, why don't you like Taylor? And it's like, are you kidding me? Like, that's such a catty question. And on top of that, we're filming right now. Like, the whole thing, it's just like, we're really going to do this on camera, but it's like, we're really doing it on camera. And there were like a lot of situations like that. The whole point was kind of a lot of the cattiness, but then it would have this veil over it as like, in mom talk, we are all here for each other. And I'm like, I don't think you guys are really here for each other. Like, this is pretty intense. Now, I have to say, I immediately feel like defensive of watching this, and I maybe should have put this in the beginning. A lot of what was enjoyable about the show to me is a lot of why I think some people like looking at Mormons online. And well, not only because I was going through a moment this weekend, okay, where I was just over deep topics. I was over just depth, and I wanted something nice and shallow and light and fluffy. I had worked out way too hard at bar class, and I literally couldn't walk. I was stuck in bed, and I'm like, I just want to watch something light and fluffy. And so that was why I turned this on. But as I'm watching them, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're all beautiful. They're all dolled up to the nines. All of their houses are spotless and clean. And I do notice that those traits, at least the way that they're presented on the internet, tend to be commonalities between lots of members and the way that they present themselves online. They're all super stylish, very pretty, have beautiful homes, just beautiful aesthetics. So yeah, I mean, the way that they presented friendships it was just shallow and fluff. Like I said, we're mom talk, we're all here for each other, but then we're all going to talk horribly about each other behind each other's backs. I don't know if it's just because I don't participate in it, so maybe other people around me don't do it to me, but the friend groups that I run in, we're not talking about each other behind each other's backs. When we were younger, that was maybe something that went down. And I do know certain people that are more likely to bring up drama with friends behind each other's backs. But the goal, if anything were to come up behind someone's back, it would be to then bring it forward to not be behind their back. The goal is not to just be catty and talk rudely. It's to actually be there for each other in an encouraging way where you can help each other work through life circumstances. And it just kind of felt like there was a whole lot of backstabbing going on in the show, and a whole lot of cattiness and not very much depth. So when they kept saying things like mom talk is here for each other, I just thought the only part of that seems true is the fact that you're all influencers. And so you know what it's like to be an influencer. Speaking of being an influencer, two of the characters on the show, although I know they're not characters, they're real people, but once again, reality show just feels like characters. We don't even know if these girls are really like this, but Taylor Frankie Paul and Whitney, not sure, Levitt, I think is her last name, they both went through their own cancellation process, which was another reason I felt like, oh, I can chime in about this because you guys know most likely. Although I did see two comments on one of my videos recently. They were like, what? She was canceled? And I was like, wow, that gives me a whole different perspective on my cancellation. The fact that there have been a couple people that had no idea. Because when it happened and we were on the cover of Fox News and CNN and all of that, it felt like literally everyone knew. And the thing is, you could tell through a handful of comments made on the show that the cancellations definitely deeply affected both of them and that they both felt really misunderstood. Now, Taylor definitely took more of the position of, at least the way that they presented it in the show, of just feeling bad for her mistakes and presenting it man, I really wish that hadn't happened. I messed up. And that tends to be why a lot of people seem to like Taylor, because the way that she's being presented is very I feel really bad. That stunk. I shouldn't have done that. And Whitney, and now Taylor was canceled. There was a whole thing. And this goes back to the relationship stuff, right? Where she basically was a swinger in her first marriage and she outed that on the internet. Then later she ended up being arrested for domestic violence. Whitney was essentially canceled. I don't know if you guys saw that video that was circulating of the mom the mom was Whitney, whose baby was in the hospital with RSV. And she basically did a dance video. And I feel like people were kind of mad at her because on the show she was defending it. And I'm sitting there thinking man, okay, first off, people are allowed to defend their choices. If she's telling the truth, which I mean, what else are you going to do other than just believe someone if they're telling you that wasn't my motive? I don't really believe unless someone shows something over and over and over, but especially via reality show. I don't think we can say, no, see, she showed over and over. It's things can be edited. But she said her intent was not the intent that people were projecting on her, but she was in fact kind of canceled for that because the video doesn't have a very good look. It's almost kind of comical, the video. It's not because her baby is sick, but her baby was getting better. And that was kind of the reason she said she made the video. It was a celebratory, baby's doing better, yay. But it is it's a funny dance. It's kind of just a funny looking situation. She starts off the dance with making a heart with her fingers. And it's just kind of funny looking. But both of them were canceled and both of them felt like they got more hate than the other person. So I know to me that was very telling in the sense of okay, so there's this book well, there's a few self-help books, right? One of them, How to Win Friends and Influence People. There's a lot, there's like a slew of self-help books, right? But a lot of them, what they have in common and what they will tell you is that most people are thinking of themselves, not other people. And they feel like everybody's thinking about them, when in reality, everybody is thinking about themselves. And that's what that cancellation little conversation said to me the most, because Whitney said that she felt like the whole internet forgave Taylor and they did not forgive her. And actually, when she said that, I was like, yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with that. But then Taylor was like, dude, she has no idea how much hate I get. Like, I've gotten so much more hate than her. And I was like, oh, really? Like, mostly just like, that's really interesting. I wouldn't have thought that. Actually, that would not have been my first response, but maybe she's right. Either way, she thought that. And so it really made me also evaluate for myself how we can just amplify our own situations to being like the worst. Like, no, my situation was so much worse. People hated me more. And it kind of flashed me back to being in high school with that same mentor I mentioned earlier. And we were meeting up one day and I was essentially talking about my flaws, the things that I had messed up and how that was so much worse than other people's flaw, whatever specific flaw it was, I don't remember. But whatever it was I was talking about, it was like, no, I'm worse. And she basically said to me, you realize that like that's a form of self-obsession, right? And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, like you thinking that you're like the worst sinner ever, the worst at this area. She's like, that is also self-obsession. You don't know that. You're still like ranking yourself and obsessing on yourself. And so that kind of made me look at myself and not only, as I say, self-obsession, not only my own cancellation, but also just this idea of like, okay, that's true. We do all tend to think that we have it the worst, that ours is the worst. And so, I don't know, I thought that was kind of interesting too. So in closing, I guess I'll just say this. If you were going to watch this show, or any reality show for that matter, just keep in mind, as a Los Angeles born native who has a history in the entertainment industry, reality TV show involvement in some ways, and influencer culture, it's all fake, okay? It's fake. It's edited together. The music, the moments, it all adds to it. It all elevates it. Don't get too invested. Don't project anything onto these girls. Don't go after them. Don't be too invested in your emotions towards them. Just, I promise you, okay, it's not real. And I will say, just like any reality show that's around, like, I don't know, Christians in general, I feel like they're going to show the most wild moments. It's not really going to be an example or indicative of the members of the church. And like I said, that's at least true for me, for all of the members of the LDS church that I've met. And I could only imagine, like, when they portray Christians on TV, a lot of the times they're not the way that they project. Kind of a great example of this also. Okay, I became obsessed with the Duggars when I was pregnant because I watched 16 and Counting, or how many kids, 19 Kids and Counting? I don't remember. I know I told you I wasn't into reality shows, guys, but I was into that reality show when I was pregnant because it has got to be one of the most wholesome shows on TV, not just like in the reality show sphere, but just on TV in general. Like every episode is pretty much just someone getting married or having a baby or the kids doing something fun. And even that show, it's kind of like the other way. I don't feel like it's necessarily indicative of all Christians because I have known so many Christians in my life, and most of them, on this is like the other way, are not like, they don't have 19 kids. Most of them are not that conservative, the ones that I've met. I will say, since leaving California, I have met way more like super conservative Christians with lots of kids. That's actually, speaking of my podcast, another conversation I'm planning on having is a friend of mine who comes from a family of 11 children. We are going to talk about that because I do think that the church has kind of like dissuaded people from having children or getting married young. That's what I experienced when Dan and I got engaged. Literally, our youth pastor asked us after we got engaged, he was like, why? I was like, what? If anybody should be celebrating, it should be our pastor. But I still don't feel like that is really, like, that show is really exemplary of how most of the Christians that I've met have been. I'm not saying that that's not a way to strive to be or that it's not good. I'm just saying it's not necessarily representative of what I would have deemed to be like your average Christian, because once again, we go back to the fact that it's TV, right? They have to like get eyeballs on them. They have to make money. And both of those shows, might I add, didn't incredible job at doing just that. Side note, I could go off on the Duggars on a whole other side rant, but I'm going to keep it in because one of these days I will eventually talk about the Duggars. I feel like when the time is right. I have some very distinct opinions about them from afar and their show. I read all of their books. Actually, to be technical, I read all of their books twice. So really, really into them. And I really have like strong opinions and ideas about just, yeah, them. I put quotes because it's like all from afar and I don't know any of them. But yeah, so that is it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this very different video for me. I debated not even doing it because, like I said, it was almost a little bit embarrassing. But I was like, you know what? I legitimately did watch it. So I'm going to do this. Side note, sometimes I also feel the same way about like secular music. I know so much secular music. You guys wouldn't even believe it. And it's not even because I spend time listening to it. Like I have a photographic memory in regards to music. I can hear a song once and I know that song for forever. That's kind of a side note. So with all of that being said, I will, God willing, see you guys back here soon with another new video. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye.